It is said that Andre Puyans believed that the bodies on his nymphs ought to be made with furs from mammals that live in the water. So I am tying this muskrat number 1 AP nymph on a 12 2x with gray thread. I'll wrap in some weighted wire just under what will be the thorax. I like putting my thread in first because I find that it helps the wire from spinning on the shank. Tuck those ends in, bring my thread back and wrap over that to hold it in place. And then I'll bring my thread down to above where the barb would be, where I will tie in a tail. Tail is dark blue dun, and it's a pretty good clump of that dark blue dun hackle fibers. Not very long. Get those wrapped in, and then I will clip out the butt ends. So the recipe that I am using is from both The Founding Flies by Valla and The Book of Fly Patterns by Eric Leiser. I'm using this darker, semi-darker mallard, or bronze mallard, I guess they call this, or mallard bronze. It's a shoulder feather for the wing casing and the legs. And I'm going to clip the butt ends so that they're straight. And then I'm going to measure. What I want is to tie in here at the back of the weighted wire halfway down the hook shank. But I want this to be long enough so that I will fold the front butt ends back for legs. So I'll just tie that in right there behind, or at the end of the weighted wire, and that will just lay down and become the wing casing. And then I'll go ahead and clip out the tips. And bring my thread. I got some more tips that came down the other side. Go get those out of there without cutting my thread. Bring my thread back down to my tail. I'll wrap under the tail once just to make sure the tail stands up. So all of Andre Puyans' nymphs basically follow the same process and pattern for building them. I'm going to tie in a piece of 0.2 millimeter wire, and you can use brass or gold or copper. This actually says gold on the spool, although it looks much more like copper to me. Maybe copper is more red. Then I'm pulling the fluffy stuff off of the back end of a muskrat pelt for the body, and I'll just take little pieces of that, spread them out, and twist them onto my thread for a dubbing noodle, and then I'll wrap the abdomen. It is supposed to be a fairly buggy fly, Although I will trim out, if I get any of the guard hairs in it, I'm going to trim those out. So I think they become distracting to the fly itself. Although I don't know if the fish would really care. Try to build a little bit of a taper here. Work up to where I have the wing casing tied in. This fly can be tied anywhere from a 10 to an 18 or whatever size you want to, I guess, but that's the recipe in Mike Valla's book. Okay, I'm up to where I have the wing casing tied in. Then I will take my thread, I'm going to counter wrap it. Although none of the instructions say to counter wrap it, I just like counter wrapping. I did read that somewhere, that counter wrapping works better to keep the wire on top of the shank or on top of the dubbing. And I'll helicopter that off. Try not to pull out the wing or the casing. Okay, I'm making a mess of my wing case. There we go. And then I'm going to pull up on the wing case and then dub underneath of it for the thorax. Also, just continuing to use more of that muskrat and build it up a little bit bigger, as thoraxes are generally. So pull back on the case and the wings, or the wing casing. Wrap under it and wrap up over the weighted wire, and then bring that up and just leave room for the head. Then I'll take that duck feather, lay it down across the top of the thorax, wrap those tips in. Now, I find it interesting that one of the things that Puyans was really trying to do was simplify the tying process, and yet I find this a little bit painstaking. Supposed to take 3 barb butt ends and fold them back, and they should be about the length of the thorax. Just take 3 on each side, fold them back, I guess get a hold of them somehow, and then wrap in front of them. And I think I've got more than 3. Keep my line tight. Yeah, I've got way more than 3. But this is kind of a unique character trait of the Puyans nymphs, is this way that he did the legs. And then once those are wrapped back, to take and clip out all of the other butt ends. Keeping just the 3 on each side. And then try to keep them on the side while I wrap around them. And then there are 2 ways to do the head, and these are outlined in Leiser's book. All of the illustrations, or all of the pictures in Mike Valla's book, have the dubbing heads. Eric Leiser says that you can do either a dubbing head or a thread and lacquered head. So I'm going to grab just another pinch of muskrat. Get that pinch of muskrat on my thread. Try to make it nice and tight. Pull down and back on the legs. Get them out of the way. And then just wrap that dubbing head in front. Looks like I have a little more dubbing than I need. And then just to hold it in place, I'm going to do a 3-turn whip finish just around the head, the eye of the hook. I don't want to build that up. I want to keep it small so that it doesn't overwhelm the dubbing head. And then I am going to just rotate it and clip off any of the long guard hairs that are in the thorax or in the abdomen. And then I am going to put just a tiny little drop of diluted goop, and I'm just going to lay that right against the eye of the hook and let that soak into that thread, and that should hold my knot.